As I started at the top of the show, I mentioned ABC journalist Kerry O'Brien being gonged today, formally, but handing it back, all in protest about the recognition of Margaret Court, which he labelled her getting an AC a deeply insensitive and divisive decision. O'Brien said his move was in support of a transgender GP who also handed back her Order of Australia over the Margaret Court Award. To discuss all of this, I'm joined now by my Tuesday Polly panel from Brisbane, Sky News contributor Campbell Newman, former Queensland Premier too, for those who can't possibly have forgotten that, and via Skype, Labor MP for the Hunter, Joel Fitzgibbon. Gentlemen, great to have you on the show on this Australia Day. Campbell Newman, I'm going to kick off with you. A lot of people don't understand or may not know that when you get an award in the honours list, you are written to first and asked if you would accept it many months out from the award. Now, clearly that's what Kerry O'Brien did. He accepted the award. In goes his letter, but he withdrew his agreement to accept the award over the weekend. Pretty extraordinary way to signal your virtue, isn't it?
I'm glad you pointed that out, Peter, because you are asked whether you, if you're successful, will accept the award. So essentially, Kerry O'Brien has ratted on that solemn agreement with the Honours and Awards system out of Government House. Remember, this is an independent committee. Look, I didn't actually like him being nominated because I think he was just doing his job. And I'm only saying that because he's pressed the button on this controversy. Yeah, I don't agree with Margaret Court and her views as well, by the way. The bottom line is an independent committee. It's away from government. They consider these matters. They decide on the criteria how to reward or recognise prominent Australians, and they've done their job. What Kerry O'Brien doing is very disappointing. It is grandstanding, it is politicking, particularly with that part of the process in mind. And frankly, he's thumbing his nose, not at the Honours and Awards Committee behind the scenes, he's thumbing his nose at Australia. And that's really quite repugnant.
Joel, there'll always be people you don't agree with getting a gong, and there'll be always people that you strongly support. I've yet to find someone who gets a gong that nobody supports, that no one thinks should get it. I mean, there'll always be someone out there supporting someone who's on that list. I think they're all pretty well qualified usually. What do you think?
Well, Peter, the last thing we want is the politicisation of the awards and honours system. The last thing we want is politicians becoming the final arbiters in who does or doesn't receive an award. I mean, as Campbell has indicated, and Happy Australia Day, everyone, as Campbell indicated, this is largely a community-generated process. People make applications about someone who's served maybe in their community or at a more national level. An independent committee assesses them and makes a recommendation to the Governor-General. And the last thing we want to do is undermine the integrity of that system by bringing politics into the process. So I don't necessarily agree with Campbell's view about Kerry O'Brien. He's taken a principled stand. Paul Keating didn't accept his award for different reasons, of course. He just felt that he'd been paid to do what he did for the country and was undeserving. He thought that would be better directed at someone who'd volunteered. But look, we need to defend the system. David Hurley, the Governor-General, has suggested the system could be improved. I agree. We should look at improving it, but not involve the politicians in the process.
And look, I would want to encourage anyone watching the show tonight to go onto the It's an Honour website, print off the forms to nominate someone. We all know someone in our community who should be nominated, and rather than throw stones at the windows and wish it was different, we should be absolutely putting forward people, because that's what makes this awards process work, if it is people that genuinely do deserve the nomination. Today in Melbourne there was a dawn service. They called it an Invasion Day dawn service in the King's Domain, and attending it was the Lord Mayor of Melbourne. Now, this follows her council's decision that they would provide logistical support to the event's organisers. Campbell, late last year, Daniel Andrews cancelled the official Australia Day parade in Melbourne CBD. He said it was all about COVID. But the Melbourne City Council, of course, rubber stamps this Invasion Day event and helps organise it. What do you think?
Oh, look, I'm just dismayed that so many people, again, using the term that Joel has used, are into politicisation of important things about our nation and the structures and whole ethos of Australia. Look, the trouble with this whole protest movement about Australia Day is what's next? Let's move today? Fine. What's the right day? There will always be some sort of grievance from certain groups. And, you know, if I just talk to the more broader issue, I really got to a point in my life now where I say to Aboriginal leaders, what do you want? As a politician, I've said sorry, I've been involved in events, I've acknowledged past wrongs. Money's been thrown at it for about the last 30, 40 years, the problems of Indigenous communities and Indigenous people being able to advance in this world. And none of it seems to be good enough. And I say to the people who are pursuing these protests is, what do you want? What is the end game? Because frankly, there are many Australians who are like me now, quite jaundiced. You know, I wanted to help when I was a politician, but frankly, how do you help a group that continue to want to actually drag down Australia? Because that's the way I see these protests.
Joel?
Peter, I'll always defend people's right to protest in a peaceful way, but we need to focus on the real areas of disadvantage. We can't be putting too much energy into having a debate about a date, the date on which we celebrate our nationhood and what we've achieved as a nation. I think that if we can move ahead, settle something on the date, I don't think the date is all that important. We still have a whole community within Australia that on average don't live as long as those of us with a European heritage, are more likely to be sick, more likely to be unemployed, less likely to enjoy home ownership. They're the big issues, and we can't be distracted.
Yeah, but let me just jump in there, because you both are from different sides of politics, but there's been no shortage of goodwill over the last probably 40 years. You're part of a government, Joel, you're part of a parliament that puts $30 billion into Aboriginal disadvantage. They're just over 3% of the national population. Why aren't we doing better then?
And the inefficient way in which that money is spent, Peter, is an indictment on the whole political process, and we need to do better. But what we need to focus on is doing better, closing those very significant gaps. I think that having a big debate about which day on which that 26th of January date is something which is offensive to some Australians. And I don't know how we can build further unity and cohesion and reach reconciliation if we continue to celebrate on a date which offends some people. Let's just fix that, move on, and focus on the real issues. Because, Peter, you've got to remember too, if we can close that gap, remove that disadvantage or large parts of it, there'll also be an economic return to a productivity enhancement. And that's not to be forgotten too.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, but while some will hate that day, there's a vast majority out there of Australians who want that day to stay. They say it in poll after poll after poll. And I think I sit with Campbell, like, what is the ask? Are we talking about treaty? Are we talking about seats in the parliament? We've heard mention today of reparations.
Well,
Peter,
this
is the issue, Campbell.
Yeah,
this is the issue.
Well, that's my point, Peter. I mean, what is the end game? And frankly, I point the finger these days at leaders in the Indigenous community. It's up to you to actually solve these problems. I'm sure there are many politicians, the Prime Minister, state premiers, who'd be only too happy to put the resources, the money in the direction that you say is going to work, but you've got to fix it. You know, when I was Premier, I was
and you've got to be accountable, and judged for the outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. I was hit with, that's a white fella solution. Well, frankly, I want an Aboriginal solution. I want them to sort these things out. And frankly, I'm sick of white Australia being blamed for issues that now should have been sorted out, given the immense resources that have been poured into this problem.
All right, gentlemen, I've got to leave it there. Joel Fitzgibbon, thank you. Looking forward to having you on Tuesdays. I'm right out of time. I'm sorry, Joel, but we'll see you next Tuesday.
Matt Canavan, he's been in government for 7 years. All the problems he spoke with you about tonight have developed on this government's watch.
All right, I'll give you free rein to hit that issue of a coal-fired power station for Hunter next week.